The desert world was silent. Only the sound of wind moved across the endless dunes. Heat pressed down on everything like an invisible weight. The sand shimmered under the twin suns, and even the rocks seemed to burn. A lone human walked there, slow and tired. His boots left deep marks in the ground, and his shadow stretched far behind him. His uniform was torn, his face covered in dust, and his eyes showed only exhaustion. He had nothing left but a small ration pack. One pack of food. One last hope. He stopped and pulled it from his belt. The silver wrapper reflected the sunlight. He looked at it as if it was the most valuable thing in the world. It was not just food. It was his chance to live another day. Without it, he would fall and the desert would take him. But as he stared at the pack, he felt something else. A presence. Someone was watching. The man raised his head slowly. The dunes ahead looked empty. The rocks stood like broken towers. At first he thought it was just his mind playing tricks. But then he saw them. Two shapes moving carefully on the ridge of sand. He froze. His heart began to beat faster. They were not human. Their movements were too graceful, too smooth. The heat waves bent their figures, but soon they came closer, and then he saw them clearly. Two alien women. Sisters, perhaps. Their skin pale and shining, almost glowing under the sun. One had skin the color of clear sky, blue and radiant, her long hair white like snow. The other was fair, almost human, with silver hair that caught the light like metal. They walked side by side, their eyes fixed on him. There was hunger in those eyes. Not the hunger of food alone, but something deeper, something he did not understand. The man gripped the ration pack tighter. Fear and confusion struck him at once. Should he run? There was nowhere to go. Should he fight? He had no weapon strong enough. His only chance was the pack in his hand. He looked at it again, then back at the sisters. His throat was dry and his lips cracked as he whispered to himself, "This is all I have." The two sisters stopped a short distance away. Their beauty was unreal, almost frightening. Their clothes were strange, fitted tightly to their forms, glowing with patterns that seemed alive. The air around them shimmered, as if their presence disturbed the desert itself. They tilted their heads, studying him in silence. The blue-skinned sister's eyes glowed faintly. The other's expression was calm, but her gaze was sharp like a blade. The human raised the ration pack slowly, holding it out in front of him. It was a desperate gesture. He hoped they would see it as peace, not weakness. The silence stretched, heavy and tense. The desert wind whispered, carrying grains of sand that cut against his skin. At last, the fair sister stepped forward. Her silver hair moved gently in the wind, and her eyes locked with his. She reached out one hand, slow and careful, as if testing him. The man's hand shook, but he did not pull back. He placed the pack into her palm. She looked down at it, curious. Then she opened it. The smell of preserved food drifted out. Nothing special to a human, but to them it was different. The sisters both leaned close, studying it as if it were some rare treasure. The blue-skinned sister took a small bite. Her lips parted slightly, and for the first time her expression changed. Wonder. She turned to her sister as if sharing something too strange to explain. The fair one tasted it next. Her eyes widened and a faint smile touched her face. The human watched, his chest tight. He had given them his last hope. Now he had nothing. If they walked away, he would die. If they chose to harm him, he could not stop them. The desert around them was vast and empty, but in that moment the entire world felt reduced to three figures in a single act of trade. The sisters looked at him again. Their eyes no longer carried only hunger. Something else had formed there, respect, curiosity, a strange bond, fragile but real. They moved closer, their steps slow, deliberate. The human's heart pounded louder. He wanted to step back, but his legs refused. They stood before him now, close enough that he could feel the strange heat radiating from their bodies. The blue sister tilted her head again, studying him. She raised her hand and touched his chest gently, right over his heart. Her touch was cool, almost soothing. The man shivered. The other sister leaned close, her voice soft, almost a whisper, but he could not understand the words. Still, the tone carried meaning. She was not threatening him. She was binding him. The human felt trapped and saved at the same time. He had traded food for survival, but what had he truly bought? Companionship, maybe. A bond that he could not break. He looked at the sisters, and for a moment the desert disappeared. The hunger in his body faded, replaced by something new, something dangerous. The silence returned, but it was no longer empty. It was full of meaning, full of suspense. He wondered if this was the beginning of a new life, or the first step into a prison he could never escape. The sisters stood at his side now, one on the left, one on the right. The desert stretched endlessly before them. The man took a deep breath, knowing everything had changed. One ration pack had bought him something beyond his imagination, but was it salvation, or something far darker? The desert heat softened as the twin suns began to sink lower in the sky. Shadows stretched across the dunes like long fingers reaching for the horizon. The man stood still, his heart heavy in his chest, watching the two alien sisters taste the food he had given them. His body was weak, yet his mind was sharper than ever. He knew the choice he had made could not be undone. The sisters ate slowly, as if each bite was a gift they had never known before. The blue-skinned one closed her eyes as the flavor touched her tongue. She made a sound so soft it barely reached his ears, a sound of wonder, not danger. Her silver-haired sister studied the packet, turning it over in her hands, her sharp gaze flicking back to him again and again. She seemed to be weighing something, testing his worth in silence. The man's throat was dry. He wanted to speak, but no words came. Instead, he took a small step back, unsure of what they would do next. He had offered his last hope to them. If they chose to leave, he would die alone under the desert sky. If they chose to stay, he could not guess what that meant. The sisters shared a glance. No words were spoken, yet something passed between them. A decision. The blue one extended her hand toward him, fingers long and delicate, her palm open. For a moment he did not move. Was it an invitation, a test? The air grew heavier, pressing down on him. Finally, with trembling fingers, he placed his hand into hers. Her skin was cool, almost soothing against the burning heat of the desert. A strange energy pulsed through her touch, faint but real, as if her heartbeat had joined with his. He felt a surge of life inside his body, even though he had not eaten in days. The fair sister stepped closer too, holding what was left of the ration pack. She offered it back to him, but when he reached, she pulled it away slightly, studying him once more. Her voice came at last, low and melodic, yet strange in tone, like music shaped into words he could not fully understand. But the meaning was clear enough. She was asking him why. Why had he given them something he needed more than anything? The man tried to answer. His voice cracked from thirst. Because you needed it. The silver-haired sister tilted her head, her eyes narrowing. She studied him like he was some puzzle left out in the sand. Then slowly she smiled. It was small, faint, but enough to change the air around them. Together, the sisters gestured for him to follow. They turned and began walking across the dunes, their steps silent and smooth. The man hesitated. If he went with them, he was leaving behind what little he still knew. Solitude, struggle, the faint hope of rescue. If he stayed, he would wither under the twin suns. His choice was no choice at all. He followed. They moved with ease while he stumbled after them, his legs heavy and weak. Yet each time he faltered, one of them slowed until he found his footing again. They guided him like guardians leading a lost soul. The dunes grew taller, the rocks sharper, and soon they approached a jagged wall of stone rising from the sands. The sisters led him to a narrow opening between the rocks, almost hidden from sight. Inside, the air shifted. Cool shadows swallowed the heat of the desert. He breathed deeply for the first time in days. The passage widened, revealing a cavern glowing faintly with light from crystals buried in the walls. Their glow was soft, pale blue and silver, casting the sisters in otherworldly light. The place felt alive, humming with a quiet energy that brushed against his skin. The man looked around in awe. "What is this place?" he whispered, though he knew they might not answer. The blue sister turned toward him. She touched one of the crystals, and it pulsed faintly under her fingers. Her eyes met his, filled with something he could not read. The silver-haired sister moved closer, setting down the empty ration pack on a stone surface as if it were a sacred relic. She placed her hand over his chest again, right above his heart. This time the pulse he felt was stronger. His breath caught and he staggered slightly. Her touch was not just gentle, it carried weight, meaning power. He realized then that his simple act of giving had changed something far beyond what he understood. He wanted to speak, to demand answers, but the sisters only looked at him in silence. Their eyes glowed faintly in the cavern light. Together they seemed like guardians of something greater, something ancient. He realized the trade was no longer about food. The ration pack had opened a door between them, and once opened, it could never be closed. The man stood in the glowing cavern, his body trembling with weakness, but his spirit pulled forward by forces he did not understand. He wondered if he had stepped into salvation, or into a bond he could never escape. And deep in the silence of the cavern, he felt it again. That strange energy, it was inside him now, moving through his blood, binding him to the alien sisters who had chosen not to leave him behind. What had begun with a simple ration pack was no longer simple. It was the start of something eternal. The cavern walls glowed with a strange blue and silver light. The crystals pulsed softly like living hearts buried in stone. The human stood there silent as the two alien sisters moved around him. Their steps were light, soundless, like shadows walking with form. He felt his body weaken, yet a new kind of strength flowed in his veins. He did not know if it was real, or if the cavern itself was tricking him. The blue-skinned sister knelt beside a pool of clear water that gathered between the rocks. She cupped it in her hands and offered it to him. He hesitated for only a moment, then drank. The water was cool, sweeter than anything he had tasted before. It slid down his dry throat and filled his body with life. He gasped softly. His hands no longer trembled as badly. His legs felt less heavy. The sisters watched him closely. Their eyes glowed faintly in the crystal light, studying his every breath, his every movement. They did not speak in words he could understand, but their expressions carried meaning. The fair one touched his arm and tilted her head as if asking if he was well. He nodded. For the first time in days, he felt alive. Yet unease lingered. Why were they helping him? What did they see in him that made him worth saving? He looked at them both, and in his chest rose a quiet fear. He had stepped into a bond he could not escape. The sisters began to move together, tracing their fingers along the crystals in the walls. The cavern hummed, a low vibration that echoed through the stone. The man could feel it in his bones. The crystals glowed brighter as they touched them, and the air grew heavy with energy. He watched in silence, unsure if he was witnessing a ritual or a warning. The blue sister turned toward him and raised her hand. Light pulsed in her palm, faint but steady. She stepped close and pressed her hand against his chest again, over his heart. His breath caught. A rush of warmth spread through him, and for an instant his vision blurred. He saw flashes of images, vast deserts filled with fire, towers of stone crumbling under alien skies, voices crying in a language he could not understand. He staggered, clutching his chest. The fair sister caught him before he fell. Her touch steadied him, but her eyes were sharp, questioning. She seemed to be testing how much he could endure. He realized then that they were showing him something. Perhaps their past, perhaps their pain. His gift of food had opened more than a bond of survival. It had opened the door to memory, to trust. When his vision cleared, the sisters were closer than before. One on his left, one on his right, standing like guardians. The air between them carried a charge unseen but felt. He looked into their eyes and he understood. They were alone. They had lost much. His act of giving, small as it was, meant more to them than he could imagine. The silence grew deep, and then the fair sister spoke again in her strange, melodic voice. He still could not grasp the words, but the tone was clear. She was making a promise, a bond. The blue sister repeated it, her hand resting gently against his arm. He did not know the language, but his heart understood. They had chosen him. The thought chilled him. He had not asked for this, yet he could not deny the pull. He was bound now, not by chains, but by something far stronger. A bond written in hunger, survival, and strange devotion. The man sat down against the stone wall, his strength slowly returning, his mind racing. He looked at the two sisters who now sat across from him, watching him with unblinking eyes. He could not look away. Their presence was overwhelming, beautiful, and terrifying at once. He whispered to himself, almost too quiet to hear. "What have I done?" The cavern answered with silence, broken only by the hum of crystals. The sisters leaned closer together, speaking in whispers of their own. He could not understand them, but he could feel it, their voices wrapping around him like invisible threads. He knew then that the trade had not been equal. One ration pack had bought him not just survival, but a bond that would last forever. And as the cavern pulsed with strange light, he began to wonder if that bond was salvation or the beginning of a prison with no walls. The cavern grew darker as night fell outside. The faint glow of the crystals was the only light. Their soft blue shimmer painted the stone walls with shifting shadows. The human sat in silence, his back pressed against the cool rock, while the two alien sisters remained close. They did not leave his side, not even for a moment. The fair sister moved first. She placed what remained of the ration pack aside, as if marking it as sacred. Then she turned her gaze to him. There was no hunger in her eyes now, but something deeper, something that bound him tighter than chains ever could. She touched her chest, then pointed to him, then to her sister. The meaning was simple. They were one now. Companions. Forever. The man's throat tightened. He had never asked for this bond, yet it was there, written in their eyes. He wondered if he should feel grateful or afraid. His heart told him both. The blue sister knelt beside him and pressed her hand gently over his heart once more. A steady warmth spread through his chest. It was not painful, but heavy, like carrying a weight he had never known. Her eyes glowed brighter, and in their depths he saw reflections of things that did not belong to his world. Endless skies, broken cities, and tears that were not his own. She was giving him something. Or perhaps she was taking something from him. The man tried to rise, but his legs were weak. The silver-haired sister caught him, steadying him with ease. He looked at her closely. Her face was calm, but her grip was firm, unyielding. He realized then that their strength was not only in their bodies, it was in their unity. They moved as one, thought as one, and now, he feared, they wanted him to be part of that unity. He whispered, his voice cracking. "Why me?" Neither answered. Yet their silence carried its own weight. Perhaps it was not about him. Perhaps it was about the act, the gift he had given, the food he had traded away without thought of himself. That act had marked him, chosen him, bound him. Hours passed, though he could not tell how many. The cavern was timeless, alive with faint energy. The sisters sat beside him, one on each side, their bodies close enough that he could feel the heat radiating from their skin. His mind told him to pull away, to break free, but his body no longer listened. A calm had spread through him, dangerous in its comfort. At times the sisters spoke to each other in whispers. Their voices echoed softly, like music drifting through the stone. Though he did not know their language, he could sense the meaning in their tone. They were speaking of him, deciding for him, planning with him. Each time their whispers stopped, they looked at him with eyes that no longer judged but claimed. The man closed his eyes, exhaustion pulling him down. When he opened them again, he felt different, stronger. His hunger was gone, his thirst forgotten. The air in the cavern filled his body with energy. He should have been relieved, but unease tightened inside him. This strength was not his own. It belonged to them. The fair sister leaned close. She traced her fingers along his arm, slow and deliberate, as if marking him. Her touch left a faint glow, a soft line of silver that shimmered briefly before fading into his skin. He pulled his arm back, startled, but she only smiled, her expression calm, almost tender. The blue one reached for his other arm, and soon he bore another mark. They were leaving pieces of themselves on him. He belonged to them now, in ways deeper than he understood. He stood, his legs steadier, and moved toward the mouth of the cavern. The desert night stretched outside, endless and black, the twin suns gone and only strange stars burning above. The cold air bit into him, but he no longer shivered. The sisters came to stand beside him, silent, their faces lifted to the sky. In that moment he saw them not as strangers, but as guardians of his fate. He realized he could no longer separate himself from them. The desert was empty, but he was no longer alone. They had bound themselves to him and in turn bound him to them. The man whispered into the silence, "I gave you food. You gave me everything else." The sisters did not answer, but their eyes told him the truth. He was theirs now. As the stars burned above the endless desert, the man understood the weight of what had happened. A single ration pack had bought him two companions who promised to never let him go. The bond was not spoken, but it was stronger than any vow he had ever known. Yet deep in his chest, unease remained. Companionship could feel like comfort, but it could also become a prison. The sisters had given him strength, life, and a place at their side. But in return, they had taken something he might never get back, his freedom. The desert outside was vast and open, but for the first time he wondered if he would ever walk it alone again. The desert outside the cavern was quiet. The twin suns had long set, leaving only strange stars above, sharp and endless in the black sky. The human stood at the edge of the stone opening, his eyes fixed on the horizon. He felt the cold night wind against his skin, but he did not shiver. The warmth of the sisters still lingered in his blood, a steady pulse that was not his own. Behind him, the cavern glowed faintly. The sisters waited there, watching him without words. Their eyes were steady, glowing in the crystal light. They did not need to speak to make their presence clear. He knew they would never let him walk into the desert alone. He breathed deeply, his chest rising and falling with unease. The bond between them had grown heavy, stronger than any chain and yet invisible. He had given them food, a simple act of kindness, but in return they had taken something far greater. They had taken his future. He turned back to them. The blue-skinned sister tilted her head, her hair glowing pale in the crystal light. The fair one stepped forward, her silver eyes fixed on him. Together they moved closer, silent, graceful, inevitable. The man whispered to himself, "What happens now?" Neither answered. Instead, the fair sister raised her hand and pointed to the horizon, where the stars burned like cold fire. Her gesture was slow, deliberate, as if telling him that his path no longer belonged to him. It belonged to them and to whatever lay beyond those stars. The human's throat tightened. He thought of his unit, the men and women he had once served with. He wondered if they still lived, or if the desert had swallowed them long ago. He thought of Earth, of the simple life he had left behind. That world felt distant now, almost unreal. He was no longer just a man. He was a companion to something alien, bound in ways he could not undo. The sisters stepped closer until they stood on either side of him again. Their presence pressed against him, warm and suffocating at once. The blue one touched his arm, her hand light but firm. The fair one placed her palm against his chest once more. His heart beat faster under her touch, but the rhythm no longer felt like his own. It felt shared, as if the three of them were one being instead of separate lives. He closed his eyes, and for a moment he saw visions again. Towers of black stone rising from endless deserts, skies torn apart by storms of fire, voices crying out in a language he still could not understand. The images were sharp, real, as if their memories were becoming his. When he opened his eyes, his body trembled. The sisters did not look surprised. They only studied him, as if measuring how much more of their world he could carry. The human stepped back, shaking his head. "No, this is not mine. These are not my memories." The sisters moved closer again, their faces calm, their eyes unyielding. The fair one whispered softly, her voice like music in the cavern. He could not understand the words, but he felt the meaning. She was telling him that it was his now. Their past was his past. Their future was his future. The bond was complete. The man felt the weight of it crush against his chest. He wanted to run, but his legs no longer listened to him. He wanted to speak, but his voice broke under the weight of silence. He knew then that the sisters had not only saved his life. They had claimed it. Outside, the desert stretched forever, a place without end. But he understood now that he would never walk it alone. Their bond would not allow it. Wherever he went, they would follow. Whatever he became, they would shape. He whispered into the night air, his words trembling. "Is this freedom, or is this the end?" The sisters stood close, their eyes glowing under the stars. Their silence was the answer. The desert wind carried the sound away, leaving only the cavern's hum and the steady pulse of crystals. The man felt the weight of eternity pressing down on him. He had traded one ration pack, and in return he had been given 2 eternal companions. But as the night stretched on, a single truth gnawed at him. Companionship could feel like love, but it could also be a cage. And as their hands rested on him, binding him with every breath, he wondered if he had walked into a bond that no human could ever escape. The stars above shimmered, cold and distant, as if watching silently. The future was no longer his, it belonged to them.